Good afternoon. Welcome to What's Going On, a show designed especially for you to keep you informed of what's going on in our community, the surrounding area, and the world. This is our last show of the year, and we have a very, very special show. We, the CATS TV staff, and I want to convey our gratitude for each of you that have tuned in each month and supported what's going on. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, I want to invite each of you to become a part of this show. You may ask questions or make comments through the various means listed on your screen. Now, for today's show, I have once again invited the City of Columbia 5th Ward Council, City Council Rep, Ms. Nauser, and 2nd Ward City Council Rep, Mr. Michael Trapp, who were co-chairs of the Mayor's Task Force on Community Violence. Welcome, Ms. Nauser, and welcome, Mr. Trapp.
Hey, thank you.
I wanted to close out this year with this particular show and my two guests because we finished our task for the mayors last month and submitted our final recommendations to the mayor and the city council. And I thought it would be a good way to end the program by discussing, well, what's going on with that whole thing. And to get the two to give us their assessment on the process and the outcome of this whole mayor's task force against community violence thing. It's not strange that this have been a big issue in our community. Just this past weekend, a young man, I call him young, 40 years old, in the prime of life, got his life taken in a shooting right here in Columbia, Missouri. Another young man, 18 years old, is struggling for life out at the hospital right now, who's got shot and a possibility that he might be paralyzed if he lives from the neck down. And I want my viewing audience to keep the family of the young man who got killed in your prayer, and especially pray for the 18-year-old young man that's struggling for life out there in the hospital. Well, again, my guests, Ms. Laura Nauser and Mr. Michael Trapp, thank you for coming on. And let us just dig into this whole thing about the mayor's task force and how it went. I want to start with you, ladies, first.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I think the process was an excellent process. We had a group of diverse individuals with varying backgrounds, both professionally and personally, who came together at the call of the mayor. And we worked, while we didn't necessarily always agree, we agreed from the very beginning that we would work on a consensus basis. And we, I think, really got down to looking at the problems within our community right off. It was a good process. We met twice a month. We involved the community. We had several community forums. So we listened to the people. We listened to our fellow task force members. And in the end, I think we came up with an excellent product for the community in our final recommendations. And so I hope that the citizens will go on to the city website and pull up our commission and review that document, because I think it's extremely important. It's not just a charge for the city government of what the government should do. It is what the people and the citizens of this community need to do to work together to solve and mitigate the violence that is happening in our community.
Excellent, excellent. And Mr. Trapp, your assessment?
I would agree with everything Ms. Nauser had to say. It was a lot of work, but I felt that it needed to be done. The first thing we did, and I think this was wise, is we really dug in to examine the local conditions, that we didn't just make a list of best practices or of what other communities are doing, but we really took the time to understand what's going on specifically in Columbia in regards to violence. And those that we came up with in the spring, those local conditions really informed the rest of the work that we did, because we were able to look at national data and best practices and ideas from the community, and we could look at them all through the lens of, is this really what's happening in violence in Colombia? What probably I think the most important facts that we learned is that almost all violent crime, at least as far as homicides, are between people who know each other. That it's not random violence, but it really gets down to social networks and who people know, and these sort of informal networks of folks who are involved with crime. Some of it's the drug trade, and some of it's just personal beef. And so that inability to resolve disputes, people who are outside of mainstream ways to resolve things like the courts or the police, are left to resolve their conflicts, and when they don't, that's when the bullets start flying. And and we've been lucky so far to where we haven't lost innocent bystanders, but that's certainly the risk.
Well, thanks. You mentioned a couple of things that I wanted to kind of touch on. Now, how long was this process?
Gosh, when did we start? It was, what, 13 months?
What,
It went by so fast, the task force.
Yeah,
15 months?
15 months, better than a
yeah.
year.
A little over a year.
And there was like 13 different citizens and you two guys
Yes.
on this, and the mayor handpicked each and every one.
Yes.
Wow. And I got to commend the mayor on that, because in my opinion, being on there, that he picked a great group of people, and the diversity of the group made it, in my opinion, very, very effective, where we was able to get the different ideas from different persuasion and point of views, from all the way up from Mr. Jerry Taylor, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, all the way down to myself and others who are just community people, which made it very, very interesting for one thing, but still, I believe that it brought out some very good perspective. As you were saying, Mike, and you mentioned that we looked at particulars from this local community. Why did we do that? In this kind of like, violence is violence no matter where you were at?
I don't think so. I think that there are particular situations for where we're at. For example, one of the big questions going into it, and it's still not completely answered, but it's how much do gangs have a role? And so when we brought forth representatives from the police department to talk specifically about what our gangs looks like, but we also had people who are on the task force who have deep connections with communities that are impacted by violence. And so that's kind of acted as a way to kind of fact check what the police are saying. But they talked about how our gangs are not like the Crips and the Bloods and huge organized criminal networks like people often think about, but they're more informal associations of young people that's really particular about life circumstances, that they come and go based upon if Johnny's mom moves away, then that gang might come to an end. But we also talked about Colombia being of a unique size, where we have more inter-gang violence than in larger communities, because Colombia is not big enough for a gang to hunker down and hold territory. Everybody goes downtown, everybody goes to the mall, and so if you live in Colombia, everybody sees everybody, and that's true for people who are involved in violence as well. So having that particular understanding, that's pretty unique to Colombia, because it's not like other places. It's not going to settle out, because often there's violence from looking at the national literature and understanding about gangs and violence. Usually it's when the drug trade or the criminal enterprise is in flux or is in play that you see a lot of violence, and then it settles down as people hold territory and maintain versus take. But that's never going to happen in Colombia. You know, there will always, as long as we have gangs, there's going to be gang violence. It's never going to settle, because we're not big enough to divide the city amongst folks. So that tells us just how important it is to create our own social networks, to look at the needs that these at-risk kids are meeting by getting involved with gangs, which is really a substitute for family. It's a lack of, and this is true in the national research, and we saw it in Colombia, is it's a lack of pro-social attitudes and beliefs, and a lack of pro-social social networks. If people don't know good people, then and they're not part of activities and involvement and part of a community or a tribe, then they're going to fall in with anyone who will have them. And there are people who prey upon our children and put them on a bad path, and that will not end until every lost kid has a group of folks that they can associate with. And so it really highlights the importance of programs like mentoring, Big Brothers and Big Sisters. You know, the fact that there's a 2-year wait for a male big, you know, is one of the reasons why we struggle like we do with our young people getting caught up in these violence enterprises.
Ms. Nauser, another unique aspect of this task force that I thought was very, very powerful is the fact that we included the community in those, forums. Could you speak on that?
Absolutely. This is a community problem and a community issue that needs to be dealt with at the community level. Again, like I said before, government is not going to necessarily solve this problem. And all too often when we government forms task force, we have a tendency to congregate with people that we associate with on a professional basis or through government interactions. And so the task force felt that it was extremely important to go to the community to ask them what they felt the problems were and what solutions they felt they could bring to the table. And I think that really played heavily on our final recommendations after we compiled all of the input that we gathered at each of the 3 forums. We had 3 forums held at 3 different locations and times so that a wide variety of citizens could come and attend these forums. They could come to all 3 or they could come to just one. We had one involved with parents. We had one that was with schools and one with the youth. And so people could choose whichever forum they wanted to attend, make their recommendations. People broke out into small groups, so there was a lot of great conversation. So not only did it bring the community to the task force, it brought the community together so that they could actually have a conversation with somebody that they may not have interacted with before to get their opinion and their viewpoint. So I think that was very eye-opening, and I think all of the comments that we heard from the individuals who attended those forums were extremely pleased with the process because they felt included and they felt that there were people actually listening to what they had to say and their suggestions. And so I think that certainly goes along the way of, maybe healing some of the community divide that we heard a lot about just, throughout the task force process as well. Because it's important to include the community. Government sometimes tends to be, sitting up on the hill and people just don't feel that it's welcoming or that their voice can be heard because they're just one out of so many. But bringing people together like that in the group format really allowed people to speak up and say what was on their mind.
I thought it was very, very excellent. And again, like you said, I spoke to a lot of people in the community and after the different events, and they were pleased. The number one thing was, like you said, they felt like their voices were heard, that it wasn't just a show. They felt like, and it was. And I would like for you to speak on that, Mike, because what we took from those events, we fashioned them into what we ultimately recommended to the city council and the mayor. Can you kind of elaborate on that, the different takes on that?
Sure. The public was really involved through the whole process. All of our meetings were open to the public, and we had public participation in every single meeting. When we broke out into work groups, any public that attended, we brought them right in to sit down, so there was no division between task force members and community members, but we worked together. When we moved to the community forums, it was fairly late in the process, but we scheduled those before we made our recommendations. We wanted to give people some idea of the conversations that we were having so they could have something to respond to structure the conversations. And when we broke out into into our work groups at the public forums, the conversations that we heard from the public very much mirrored the conversations that we had had in the task force, which I think gets back to the mayor did a really good job of who he selected as representative of this is what Columbia looks like. One specific example we were talking about, I think the most public interest got into in regards to law enforcement. And it was around the time of when Ferguson events were arising, and so there was certainly a lot of public interest in regards to that. And we had had a recommendation for more robust, better, more effective training for the police in regards to cultural competency and how to deal with diverse people and how to manage unconscious bias. But a community member raised the point that diversity training, cultural competency training is really only effective when you have a diverse group of people. And so the police, just doing their own internal training, since they're overwhelmingly white, come from very much the same socioeconomic, but there's not a diverse group of folks. And so involving community members in cultural diversity training was really, I think, one of the more actionable and powerful recommendations of the task force. So it's something that we're definitely going to have to follow through the implementation phase to make sure that that goes beyond just being a good idea, but something that gets implemented in the way that we train our police. And then we not only have better trained police who are more capable in dealing with minority populations and understanding cultural factors and their own bias, but it's also a chance to build relationships, to have people, for community members to see that behind the badge, police officers are human beings and also, have the same kinds of struggles that everybody does. I think Ms. Nauser and I as politicians sometimes get treated as cartoon characters and not people, that people say very hurtful things, and because we're public figures and we put ourselves out there, but and they lose track of, they look at only that public figure and who they see through the media, and they don't realize that we're human beings and have feelings and families and lives, and that we do this for very little money out of our time and out of a sense of giving back. And I think it's that same way with the police, that people see them as a monolithic thing, that they're the police, when each one of those folks is a human being with the same hopes and fears and dreams that we all have. And so, it's my hope that, as we move forward, that we can create more opportunities for both the police and the community members to kind of see their common humanity, because we're all, as different as we all are and as diverse as we all are, we're way more the same than we are different.
Well, what was one of the ways of the recommendation that would bring about that type of more of getting to know one another?
I think there's two things. There's the training piece that's a big part of that, and then there's also kind of a career development program path. In the last budget, we eliminated as outdated and not really meeting our needs the old career development path of how do you get raises, how do you move up, what's the criteria that people get judged upon. And what we would like to see is a greater emphasis on social skills, resolving conflicts, and building relationships in the community as something that, like language skills and those kinds of things. It's important that we have SWAT officers and K-9 officers and those kinds of things. But it's also important that we have police officers who can relate to people, who can diffuse situations versus escalate them, who can proactively build relationships so that we get greater cooperation.
In that community policing, wasn't that a large recommendation?
It certainly was. And but with the defeat of the property tax for more police, I'm not as optimistic as I was a month ago that that's going to be something that we can act on. Community policing is the idea that instead of just responding to situations, that the police go out and proactively build relationships and try to keep crime from ever happening. The problem with it is it's a labor-intensive form of police, and it's going to be difficult to do under our current resources. So we're going to have to continue to get creative and find increased funding for the police. That was another recommendation of the task force. There is a level where some of us are not totally comfortable with using the police to solve these kinds of social ills, but there was a general consensus within the task force that we need more resources to attract and train the best officers so that we can have a police force that looks like the people that they serve and that has the time to not just run from 911 call to 911 call, but to build relationships, take time to play ball, take some time to talk to kids and those kinds of things. So I think that that's an ultimate goal, but I think it's not going to happen this year, and I really had thought that it would.
It's moving very
Right.
slowly, but it's moving in the right direction.
Sure.
But it's going to take a little longer to really move the needle on that whole entire policing philosophy and strategy. And so,
And hopefully it won't take another Ferguson type of incident that'll make us move a little bit faster.
well, we,
you know.
we certainly hope not.
But speaking on that, as we're seeing this, the Ferguson situation is always on every news channel every day. And in my mind, in my own opinion, I feel like we are doing something proactively with this task force and the recommendations to prevent that from happening here in Columbia. And we got about 3 minutes, but Ms. Nauser, I wanted you to kind of speak on the fact that we're not just make the recommendation and we're going on about our business.
No, I think we're very fortunate in the fact that Mr. Trapp and I are active members on the city council. So the two co-chairs are there to certainly light the fire, so to say, underneath city staff to make certain that those recommendations don't end up like many of our policy recommendations that sit upon a bookshelf somewhere and collect dust. We've already started talking at several of the meetings, bringing up suggestions on how we can implement the recommendations of the task force. And I had recommended to city staff that they start now, because when we have our spring retreat, the couple of days, we can implement and work these recommendations into our strategic plan and some of our upcoming financial issues during the budget season. So we certainly want to maintain and continue working on this process. And I think another testament to how well the group worked together and how productive we were, everybody agreed to still keep together and meet as just an independent citizens group to hold Michael and I accountable, as well as city government, to make certain that we are moving forward on these recommendations, or if there's something else they see within the community, they can certainly assist in some of these recommendations to bring that information forward. So I think that is certainly unique on any task force that I've seen over the years that I've been on council, that once it was disbanded, the people had such great respect and working relationship that they wanted to keep together to focus on this issue, because it's very important to a lot of people and it's important to our community. Because we don't want to have a Ferguson event here in our community. So it's very important that we work to bridge those gaps between our community and, get people working on the same page. We need police working with the citizens and citizens working with the police. We shouldn't have them as two, groups of people working against each other. We should be working with each other.
Well, we got about 1 minute left, and I wanted to, first of all, commend you guys because y'all did an excellent job as co-chairing that whole event for 15 months, making sure that we stayed focused and on task. A lot of times I was thinking, well, it's kind of getting away, and you guys stepped in and kept us focused. And also I want to commend you because it's a testament that this task force did a great thing just by last night the city council passing the ban the box ordinance here in Columbia that's going to help a whole lot of ex-offenders be able to overcome that unemployment blockout type of situation. So I want to commend both of you guys for steadily being out there on the front line. And I know that it's not easy because a lot of these type of recommendation is not very popular with everyone, especially with the law enforcement agency and some of the things that came out in this task force, how that divide was getting wider instead of getting closer. So I want to commend you for that. I want to thank you both for taking time out to come and letting our listening and our viewing audience know what's going on with this task force. And hopefully next year, we will be able to come back and give them some update on what we're doing with the citizen group that we're formed, and going to continue to look over these issues and making sure. Another thing that I was thinking about with us agreeing to continue to meet is the fact that this is like a living document. And if some of it is not relevant anymore, we can change it.
Absolutely.
And look at some new ways, because there's new things that's coming out all the time. So thank you both
Thank you.
for being on
Thank you.
what's going on.
Oh, sorry
That's
about
all
that.
right. That's all right. We can do it. And I want to thank my viewing audience for being such a support this year with what's going on. As you're saying, we want to keep you informed with the things that's going on in our community and surrounding community. As we have seen, the things that happened in Ferguson, it's not isolated to Ferguson. We got people here that's very interesting, going down there, marching, and wanting to see justice prevail. And that's something that we all are interested in. And the main thing that I really appreciate about Columbia is the fact that we care about our cities. And you two are a testament to that. You volunteered extra hours in all of this. And all the 13 citizens, we all spent numerous and numerous hours working on this. And that's because of our love for this city. And we want to make this city a safe place and inclusive for everyone to live a prosperous life. So with that said, I believe that that's a good note to end, and look forward to a new year of doing even more in this area. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, from our audience, there's some things on your screen. This particular show is going to be replayed throughout the month. So tell your friends, your relatives, your family to tune in to Columbia Access TV. You can go online and Google it, and it'll show you, it'll pull up, and you can go to what's going on, click on that, and you can see the schedule of this particular show being run throughout the month. I would encourage you to get together with your friends, have a party, and watch what's going on. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
And God bless you all. Have a happy, happy New Year's and a wonderful Christmas vacation.